everybody. I'm Alex Hartley. Welcome to our session on funding, fuel poverty and energy advice. What we would love from you initially is if everybody could pop in the chat your name, where you're from, and if you have successfully applied before for funding such projects, or if this is all completely new to you. The poll has just been launched because we'd like to know if you have had success before, and we don't want to be teaching you to suck eggs, but we want to know how many people to bring along for new information on this subject. While you do that, I'll just introduce myself and Community Energy London. My name is Alex Hartley, and I've been working on projects like this on and off for 18 years. And I am a co-founder of CELSI, and I'm currently the fuel poverty coordinator for Community Energy London. For those of you that are uninitiated or yet to see the light and pay a whole £1 to become a member of Community Energy London, we're a group that's set up to be the voice of community energy in London. Funnily enough, we are what we say on the tin, and we've been going for several years now, and there's about 30 groups across London working in this space. But we also think there's probably a lot more actors that give community energy based advice that could become members of Community Energy London. So the more the merrier, we say. Let's be a community energy community. So Catherine, my colleague, is online, who is being the hostess with the mostess, and my colleague Lorraine giving us a wave. Thank you there. I wish we were somewhere tropical with a nice beach on the lunch on the beach afterwards, but I'm looking at the sky. It's pretty overcast in southeast London right now. Thank you to those of you that have already popped in the chat who you are and where you are from. So I'll just share my screen with a couple of introduction slides before we get onto the really good bits, which are getting to grips with preparing to do a search for a funder to help you do these sorts of projects in your communities, but also the very interesting bit, hearing from some funders themselves and getting to pose them a couple of questions to find out a little bit more about whether they could be suitable for something that your group has looked at undertaking. So throughout the time, I've just had a message. I'm about to share my screen, but it just said host has disabled screen sharing. So that we'll see, shall we?
Sorry, you can do it now.
Okay, thank you very much. Just what you want to see on a Zoom. Lovely. There's always something that will go wrong. Okay, so in the chat, you're popping. Oh, if the slideshow wants to start, come on, little computer, there we go. So everybody should hopefully be able to see the introduction. So
yeah,
name, where you're from, and the sentences where you're at with energy advocacy. And that's the name that we've started using because it's more than just energy saving or energy bill related advice. It's a whole suite of things. But we'll get into that a little bit more. So just so you know what we're up to, we're doing a bit of an introduction. We're looking at why using a PID, a project initiation document, before you even start funding is a jolly good idea. We're going to have a practice at filling out a few of these sorts of documents, because even though they look pretty horrible and daunting, they're actually really good tools, and investing some time in them then means you're likely to increase how successful you are at your funding bid. Then we're going to hear from some funders. We've got Action Funder, we've got Green Funders, Energy Redress and UK Power Networks. And then you will have 10 minutes to put some specific questions to them. So be thinking about that while you hear from them. Then we've got a little bit of information from Dr. Giovanna Speciale, talking about another way that you could get funding to run your projects. And then we'll just have a quick wrap up and what's next, and also that anybody that wants to look at doing this sort of project can actually book half an hour with me, so we could go over any ideas, or you want to have a fresh pair of eyes, go over your group's funding bid or whatever you need, and how that is part of my job role for CEL at the moment. So just a quick recap on who we're doing this and why we're doing this. You've all seen the light and you've come along to this session, so I'm going to assume that everybody realizes that doing energy advice on fuel poverty tackling projects with the most vulnerable in our communities is a jolly good idea. I probably don't need to tell you there's never been more of a need because of the cost of living crisis coupled with the climate emergency, and also that we need to shift to a more democratic, decentralized, fair and clean energy system. So we're doing our bit in community energy. Different user groups that might need this energy advice, that can be someone who's pretty confident doing things, but they might just need signposting, right through to people at the other end of the scale that might need a lot of intensive help, from asylum seekers, mental health problems, English as a second language, and so forth. So these are the people we're going to be looking at targeting and what's going to be best for your group to look at. And then you can probably break down where the 3 areas best to focus your time, energy and project at. First of all, look at what's in your area, and that you're not going to be competing with anyone because there's more than enough need for everybody to go on. Also, you can also complement what else is on the ground. For example, there might be a really good home visit service, but people in the community don't actually know about it, but by working maybe with a trusted community partner like Purnell in North London have done with the lovely Caxton House, and they've worked and signposted people to the Shine project, for example. The other area you might want to look at is geography within your local authority or borough. You can find out this information by looking. Parallel's a really good tool. You can see that it's where the pockets of fuel poverty are. Then you've got the sub-regional stats from the lower super output areas alongside the London data store information. And C, you might want to look at the availability of a local partner to work in partnership with. Now, you might be a community group looking to find a community energy partner, or you might be a community energy partner looking to work with an established community group or centre or initiative that's already on the ground. It could be through a food bank, it could be working with your local Extinction Rebellion group, it could be all sorts of different variables, or it might just be yourselves to then being the main hub of everything that then goes out to help people. And then just a quick look at what these energy advice interventions could be. It could be anything from this list. It's not exhaustive, but it just gives you an idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about fuel poverty and energy advice projects. And these normally translate to something along the lines of something like, it could be training frontline workers to then refer to existing schemes or your projects internally. It could be energy cafes where you pop up in a place where lots of vulnerable people go. It sounds really awful targeting the vulnerable, but that's what we try and do. And that can be then delivered in a sort of stigma-free setting with a cup of tea and a bit of cake or a banana or what have you, and then customize that advice for the person. This could be just a purely home visits focused type of project, or it could be an energy champion project looking at training up a cohort of people to then either go and engage their friends, family and peers, or it could be an older adults group. I'm just thinking of a lovely project we did in Lewisham with my Celsi hat on a couple of years ago, where we worked with 6 different, thank you very much for that little reminder on the timings there. So what we're going to do when we do the exercise in a moment is we're going to go into breakout groups, and you're going to have time and opportunity to think about a project that you're going to be told about. And then we're going to look at how to the template is quite intimidating. It has got everything and anything on it, but as an organization, you can strip those out to the ones that you think are most relevant. Even though it looks absolutely horrible because it's got so many bits and pieces to it, it's actually a really good investment of time, because it helps you as an organization to not just identify the need and what you want to do and what you're best placed to do. For example, if no one has access to a car, it's probably not a good idea to do a home visit based project, because you need to cart a lot of kit around, for example. If you've got low resources, doing something to train up frontline workers and volunteers and organizations in what can be done at the moment, that's another good way to get the advice signposted to people by turning them into ambassadors for yourselves. I'm just having a look to see if my colleague Sydney is in the room, because she could probably, no, she's
No,
not.
I don't think she is.
Okay, never mind. I will stop sharing my screen. And so, are we ready to go into breakout groups?
2 more seconds.
I won't do some horrible hold music. So just to recap what the exercise is, we're going to be, actually, Lorraine, do you have the case study to share on the screen at all?
Yeah, I can put it up for you. Put it in the chat.
Oh, even better, thank you. So if everybody copies and pastes that, because when we get popped into, well, copies it rather, when we get popped into breakout rooms, the chat doesn't become available. So you'll have to sort of repaste it for yourselves. So if you see what Lorraine's popped there for us, it's a bit of a background that you're imagining that you're a group that wants to look at delivering its first energy advice-based project, and how on earth would you go about starting to fill out the two most important bits on the PID at this stage would be doing a summary and the reason why, rather the need, and then also what the deliverables, the outputs, the products, the end results, the outcomes. So in each group you'll have myself, Lorraine, or Catherine.
Get ready when you are.
Thank you, Catherine. And we will be, we can populate the PID document as you talk about as a group what you think the most important things are to pop into each of the sections. So before we go into breakout groups, you haven't seen the PID yet, you'll see that in the breakout group. You've got
I have emailed it to you as well.
Oh yes, of course you did. Thank you, Catherine. And you've got the description there in the chat of what the case study, who your group is going to be. Does anyone have any questions before we all fly off to our little groups? No, lovely. I will take that. I've explained it at least semi well enough for you all to be on board. Okay, Catherine, if you wouldn't mind doing the honours, that would be lovely.
Selena, no worries, that's fine, don't worry. You're in Lorraine's group, so it's fine if you can't talk, just put a message in, but we'd love to hear from as many of you as possible, but of course if you can't, that's fine as well. Right, open rooms, like Sesame. Right,
Thanks,
you should have all been invited. Hopefully you will be vanishing. The question is, did I assign everyone? Are you okay? Are you okay to join? That might be everyone back now.
Yes, that looks like it.
Yeah.
So that was just a taster really to hopefully make the template seem slightly less horrible and technical and corporate as it currently looks. But it's just to start thinking about, rather than trying to adapt to the needs of funders, to actually think about, first of all, what the actual need is for your local community and for yourselves as an organisation. So enough about our opinions. It's time to hear from some funders. And we're very blessed today that we've got quite a few people in the room that can talk to us about this. So I would like to hand over, first of all, to Graham Ayling from the Redress Fund.
Hi, Alex. Hi, everyone. Do you have my presentation there? Just got a couple of slides to put up and share. Great, thank you. So I'm going to talk about the Energy Industry Voluntary Redress Scheme. And just while the slides are popping up, I will start talking because I know we're on a time scale. But what Energy Redress does is distributes voluntary payments from energy companies, and those payments arise as a result of investigations by Ofgem when there's been a breach of energy industry rules. So you can skip on to the next slide, which I'm just on. And so I work at Energy Saving Trust, and we manage the distribution of those funds. The key funding priority is supporting energy consumers in vulnerable situations. We have a couple of other priorities of innovation to benefit energy consumers and carbon emission reduction that benefits energy consumers. Each of those two can only have up to 15% of the budget, so 30% combined together, and then 70% of the funding goes on to vulnerable energy consumers, at least 70% of the funding. Next slide, please. We have had some kind of changes to the program just recently. So we've done this for about 4 years, and we've just started a new contract with Ofgem to keep doing it. Main change on that is up to now, it has only been charities that could apply. So Ofgem has now decided to open the innovation and the carbon emissions funds to community energy groups, basically, and the way they've defined that is community benefit societies, cooperatives, and community interest companies. So if you've got an advice project, then and you're going to lead it as a community energy group, then either it needs to be kind of genuinely innovative, or it needs to be focused on carbon saving. That's not to say you couldn't do something that is a kind of just transition project, working with vulnerable people from a kind of carbon perspective. So there are possibilities to do that. Next slide, please. But the other way of doing things, as I said, it's only registered charities that can lead for the main fund for vulnerable energy consumers, but other organizations can partner with charities, and we've got a number of community energy groups working on redress projects, partnering with a charity lead. There may be one or two people in the room at the minute who are involved in those, and I think the only thing to be careful of on that is to make sure that the charity leads and is accountable, because that's the organization that we have to have our agreement with, and we just want to make sure that the governance is right for everyone, because it could cause all sorts of problems for everyone down the line if that doesn't work well. One other important point to make: regulated energy companies cannot benefit in any way. That creates a certain amount of complexity for us. The principle is that energy companies can't then benefit from their own or their competitors' redress payments, because those payments are supposed to be for the public good. But obviously things like energy company obligations start to get complicated. So we need to be really careful that redress projects aren't just doing an energy company's marketing for their eco offering or those kinds of things. And we're not allowed to fund any capital measures within the scope of eco, which makes life quite difficult because obviously the theoretical scope of eco is huge, even though the amount of work that's getting done isn't. So I think that's a big reason why energy advice is a big part of what this program funds. But if you can find capital measures that are outside the scope of eco, then capital can be funded as well as revenue. Next slide, please. I'll try and gallop through the rest of them. So it's a two-step process: register and then apply for funding. The minimum grant is 20,000. The theoretical maximum is 2 million. Sometimes it's usually going to be lower than that, depending on the size of the fund. Next slide. Quick note on our aims, because this kind of drives everything that we do. So the number one is that we want to maximize the positive impact of redress money. So we want to get as much positive impact, particularly for very much targeted at vulnerable people, for all of that money. And that's where, you know, it's really interesting to hear the discussion about the PID earlier on. That seems a very sensible approach to be thinking that through. And I can talk a bit more about that in a minute around questions if it's helpful. And transparency is the other one. So we want to be able to show what impact this has actually had in people's lives for the money, because we know we've got a substantial amount of money, but we've not got enough money to fix all of the problems there. So if we can actually get really good data on what's happened as a result of the money, we can start to build an evidence base that we can share with policymakers and other funders to say, look, this is how much benefit you can get from putting money into this sector. Next slide, please. I'm nearly at the end now. In fact, this is the last formal slide. So a couple of quick points on what makes a good bid. Projects with actions that are clearly focused on delivering impact. It's very easy to kind of fall into the trap of being focused on, you know, how do I raise money for my team and my organization and all of that kind of thing. Completely understand why people do that. I'm sure I've done the same thing myself in the past. But in terms of like a really compelling bid, stays very focused on how can we deliver that benefit to the people that we're trying to help. And great if you still want to keep your team, keep your organization running, but make sure that those actions are focused and that they're focused on specifically the people that you're trying to help. So again, a really, really compelling bid shows that they understand the people they're working with and they've tailored the way that they approach that. Oh, that's me running out of time. Okay, I'll very quickly gallop through the rest if that's okay. Or do you want me to stop dead? So my other quick points were, think about the most effective way, the most cost-effective way to deliver change for your clients. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the cheapest, but we want to see plenty of impact for the money. I've already mentioned about capital measures within the scope of eco that we can't fund. Show you've got the capacity to deliver good advice. We want to be able to see energy expertise, certainly something that you've all got in spades, and be joined up, additionality. So we know there are lots and lots of different organizations trying to do this. Tell us about who else is around you and how you're going to work with them. It really helps us to see that projects are going to be greater than the sum of their parts. Thank you. That's it from me.
Thank you, Graham. Brilliant whistle-stop tour of all things redress there. And over to Perrin.
Hey everyone, I am going to try and make this work in 6 minutes. Let's see how I get on. So my name is Perrin and I'm tuning in from Action Funder, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the platform and the Strong Foundations grants that is currently running in London. Next slide, please. Action Funder is a funding platform that connects businesses who want to distribute funding and nonprofits needing funding for their projects. It's a really quick, easy and free tool to use to secure funding, and it's suitable for all types of nonprofits, from registered charities to small groups of volunteers and social enterprises. On Action Funder, you have funding coming from businesses and foundations, and they launch funding pots with different locations and different focus area that can be, climate change and environment, to mental health and well-being, or physical health. The grants usually range from £5,000 to £500, or the opposite. On Action Funder, we're really keen to make sure that your project can fit several funds at once, so you do not have to create unique funding applications for all the funds that you're interested in applying to. So one application can be submitted to several funds at the same time. And next slide, please. So the fund that I was coming to talk about today is actually part of a bigger campaign that's running in several locations in the UK. The funder is Sir Robert McAlpine, and it's a construction and civil engineering company. And their goal is to support a project based around their sites and offices that support the local community and generate impact. So amongst other things, they're interested in funding projects that worked on sustainable consumption and production. But there's also other areas of work, as you can see at the bottom, and that includes education, employment, climate and nature. So if you do decide to apply to this fund, you'll actually be applying along with very different types of organizations. And sustainable consumption and production includes projects working on recycling, community energy, sharing economy, etc. So on Action Funder, this is what the funds page look like. And for this fund, you'll see you have the location, which is central London, including Southwark. You have the focus area, so quite wide for this one. How much you can apply for. So this fund will award you a maximum of £5,000 per project, and the total pot in the top left is £25,000. The deadline to apply is the 20th of July. Next slide, please. So as a nonprofit, if you want to apply to a fund, you just have to sign up and create your organization's profile. And based on the information that you provide, so your location, your focus area, you receive automatic notification that let you know that a fund has launched that's relevant for your organization. You can then review the criteria and apply directly on the platform by posting a project. So your project is your funding application, and you can have several running at the same time. To be submitted to a fund, because Action Funder is an automatic matchmaking platform, your project has to match 3 criteria. So it has to be in the right location, it has to have at least one focus area in common with the fund, and the budget shouldn't be higher than the maximum individual grant amount indicated on the funds page. So for this specific fund, it will be £5,000. Some of them will be 3,000, 2,000, it really depends. There's 3 steps to creating a project. So as you can see here, step 1 on the top left is your key details, project name, funding required, location, etc. The step 2 at the bottom right is your pitch, so your time to shine and pitch for funding, and you answer 3 questions. What is the problem? So that's the motivation behind your project. What is the solution? So that's the goal of the project. And why you are best placed to deliver this project. So why your organization has the skills and experience to make the project a success. Next slide, please. And this is the last step, which is your delivery plan, so a budget breakdown and all information on expected impact, beneficiaries, and any track record. You actually also have the possibility to do the pitch in the form of a video, if that's a format that you're comfortable with. They're really interactive, and a lot of our funders really like them, and you have to answer the exact same 3 questions as for a written pitch. Next slide, please. So that's just an example of what a project looked like to a funder. This particular project is from Axe Foods Cooperative, which is a social enterprise looking to fight fuel poverty by offering free woodland management services in return for a share of the wood extracted that will then be donated to people in need. And the funding in the budget breakdown mentioned that this will be used to buy equipment, get the volunteer first aid training, etc. You can't read, it's way too small, so you just have to take my word for it, but it's a really good pitch. And a few reasons for that is that the need is clearly supported by research, facts, and number. The solution, so the second paragraph, is very clear to anyone. So even for me, for example, who was mentioning earlier that I don't have a lot of knowledge on community energy or fuel poverty, I can read the pitch and understand exactly what the outcomes will be, what the outputs will be. And the last paragraph, which is the why are you best placed to deliver the project, is very clear, and it clearly highlights the skills of the volunteers and the track record of the organization. Okay, last slide. So quickly, you can see that applications are really, really short on Action Funder, and they're very to the point. And there's just a few things to remember is that after reading your pitch, the funder should have a very good understanding of your project and the impact it will have on the beneficiaries. So along with describing the activities and the deliverables, you should really also focus on the medium and long-term effects of your project. And of course, remember that you're talking to a person, so do make sure that you engage with them, that you excite them, and that you really highlight why your project is the one that they should fund. And I won't read through the rest, but if you get the slides later, you can absolutely go through everything. And that's all for me. Need more help? I'm here.
Oh, fantastic, Perrin. I learned more about Action Funder then, so that was fantastic. And I was thinking of, so Ruth on the call, for example, involved with Transition Town Ilford and looking at the next stage with them, they do a repair cafe and then looking at having the energy advice cafe. So they could actually apply for support for both being run together through yours, because it's got that, you know, the whole sustainability and community view. Fantastic. Okay, and who do we have who's joined us from Green Funders, the Environmental Funders Network today? I never got the name for who was actually joining us. So.
Not sure, no one's announced themselves.
No, okay. All right, I'll just give a 2-minute overview of them then. So greenfunders.org, it's a network of small foundations and trusts. It was the head of extending philanthropy, or I can't remember what the person was called. Sorry, I never got their name. So for example, Celsi applied to them last year, and similarly to Action Funder, you applied for lots of sort of smaller pots to make up the amount of funding you needed overall. So I think, I can't remember what Celsi got. I think it was about £20,000, but it was made up of a handful of smaller places to get the money to what we needed to deliver. And it was not too much of a onerous project, kind of on the reporting side of things, but luckily we've got G to do that, because gosh, I wouldn't have the patience or the brain space to do it. So they're another source of funding to do that's not the kind of usual suspects like the big lottery awards for all 10 grand kind of approach as well. And then last but not least, we're going to hear what's going on with UK Power Networks, UKPN, and Michael from there. And our eagle-eyed chair of Community Energy London spotted a press release mentioning them today. So, oh, that's great. Thank you, Perrin, for clarifying that. So over to Michael with a picture of what's going on with you guys.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Michael Horwoods. I'm the Public Affairs Manager for UK Power Networks. I'm actually filling in for my colleague who we're currently recruiting for a social sustainability program manager who will be looking after all of our fuel poverty work. So we've worked with a range of organisations to deliver face-to-face advice. And since 2015, we've reached, through partners, over 2.5 million people with some type of support or energy saving advice. Now, we're coming to the end of our current price control period. So this lasts around 8 years, or previously involved around 8 years. And the new one starts in 9 months' time and will last just for 5 years, from 2023 to 2028. Now we've produced our draft plans, and next week we actually hear from Ofgem, the energy regulator, as to whether they accept our business plan. And our business plan ultimately determines every aspect of our work and what we propose to spend our customers' money on. So ultimately the part of the plan I think that will be interest to all of you is our work on fuel poverty. And the good news is that we propose to rapidly expand our fuel poverty programme and our support for partners such as community energy groups to deliver more amazing work on the ground with people, with consumers, with residents to achieve more work in tackling fuel poverty. And just to illustrate that, we currently have a target at the moment of delivering through partners face-to-face fuel poverty advice and interventions with around 14,000 people a year in fuel poverty. And in our proposed business plan, we're going to increase that. We aim to increase that face-to-face advice for 100,000 people a year in our network area who are in fuel poverty, and to also reach around 4 million customers with generic advice through website, through media campaigns, who are at risk of fuel poverty. So a 7 times increase really in the amount of people that receive face-to-face advice. And ultimately that'll be delivered through partners, through community organisations, community energy organisations who've helped us over the past 8 years deliver on that work, and obviously through funding, to help support that. So once our draft determination for our business plan comes out next week, I think we'll be able to start preparing our framework as to how we can work with partners to achieve that 100,000 people a year. And that, of course, will involve engagement with groups such as community energy groups to receive feedback on our Power Partners programme, which is the programme we've had for the past few years on funding community energy advice sessions, interventions, all manner of interventions, to improve energy efficiency measures in homes. So it will give us a sense of what more we can do to improve the process for people who've been successful and unsuccessful at applying for our programme in the past. Now, unfortunately, that means in this moment of time, just because we've just completed our final round of Power Partners funding, which is our programmes for this year up until April 2023, I don't have much detail on what that sort of mechanism looks like and what the application process looks like. But I hope it gives good context of what's essentially to come, and our ambition as a company to help more people and ultimately support more community energy groups and community organisations with their work tackling fuel poverty. So in the recent round, we had 7 organisations awarded that cover the London area that were in receipt of the Power Partners funds for this year, and that's actually in addition to an extra 3 who were given money last year for a 2-year programme. So I think just in generic information from our Power Partners programme, and actually it actually replicates a lot actually what Graham said, about what we're looking for and what organisations are looking for. The first thing is capturing measurable outcomes and robust data. So when you make the bids, you sort of need to include how you will ensure that your data that you capture for money saved for consumers, for people in fuel poverty, is really accurate and robust. And so just to give an example, in years gone by, partners would often report an on average saving of people. So they would calculate that generally every person they see, they maybe save around sort of £20–30 or more per person. And actually what we are looking for is now robust data that actually gives a per person saving. So actually, as you sit down potentially with customers in the days when you could easily switch, energy supplier, but also the interventions that you would put in people's homes, to actually capture that on a per person data, so that when you give us the feedback of how much, how effective your project has been, it's actually really robust. And that's important to us because we also have to report to Ofgem the impact of our work, and equally they expect us to provide them in return with robust data on that activity. The second thing is innovative ways to reach hard to reach communities and support them. So we are a company of engineers, and we like to see new ways of working, innovative ways that ultimately deliver better outcomes. So if you're thinking of targeting particularly hard to reach communities, so people who are less engaged in the energy market, less traditionally willing to accept help from other partners, local authorities in receiving energy advice support, or those who have additional barriers such as, for example, language, accessibility, or their own personal circumstances, and a range of personal circumstances means they're not as easily able to access access traditional support. It's those kind of programs that we're really interested in, because we can, we can obviously support those through funding and then actually learn from them to share with the rest of our partners across our network area and also across the UK as to what kind of projects, if given more funding from other funders, from government, could actually achieve some amazing outcomes. And the final bit is impact. So we want to ensure the money being awarded is proportionate and effective to those being helped. And equally, as Graham said, that the project that we're funding is directly helping people, as opposed to sort of like back office support to help people. We like to see that the money being awarded is directly people orientated, so it's going straight into giving advice or support or interventions to help them. And it's not necessarily a problem if the money you're asking for is being used to support a program which will help those hard to reach communities that does require additional support. So you may not reach as many people, but actually the effect of helping those really hard to reach people is really impactful, because they really are people from communities that may not generally access support from other organisations. But I think it's really important to highlight why that is in the application, so that we can understand sort of like why the amount we're asking for is sort of like is being delivered in such a way. And then the other part to that on impact is it's just to demonstrate any evidence that you've had in previous years of your programme, or if it's a new programme, any research or trial or questionnaires that would demonstrate that it's it could be a really effective project. It all helps the application to us understand that sort of like supporting the project will hopefully make a real difference on the ground. So that's it from me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Michael. Good to know that our district network operator is expanding more into the support that they offer for this area, because it's very much needed. So it's great you're showing that leadership there, and hopefully we'll be able to get applying to it sooner rather than later. And also an invitation, if you have a link for the job, share it with Catherine and we can send that out to our networks and newsletter membership, because I'm sure there's lots of people within our network that would love to apply for that job. It sounds great.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's actually just closed, so the deadline just passed. So apologies for that.
Typical. Okay, great. So now over to questions for our funders who've bravely said that they will take some questions from us all. I think there's some in the chat that Lorraine is going to pull out for us, but also if anyone wants to raise their digital hand and come in and ask person to person, then please go ahead. If not, over to Lorraine.
Yeah, I think the ones in the chat have been answered. Any hands up?
So I think Alex asked a question to me just about does the Power Partners, the old Power Partners program, and potentially our future work include eco measures values? So as I understand it, like interventions in homes, so for example, like things like draft excluders, reflectors behind radiators, that's all included, and could be part of a project. So yes, we would sort of pay for that. I think the key thing is just to think about sort of like, again, impact. So although you could bid for a very small amount of people to put insulation in people's homes, like sort of loft insulation, the reality is that would probably not, sort of not deliver sort of like the greater numbers, unless you could demonstrate it was, hard to reach people who wouldn't access even the energy suppliers, social obligation funding. It's best to think about how those eco measures and energy efficiency measures could achieve the impact at scale. So sort of smaller interventions that could still make a big difference, but accessing more people would probably be you sort of see more favourably than, for example, a very small number of people with more costly energy efficiency improvements.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, when we've gone on to further refer to people, because it takes a long time, and to track what happens with eco or green homes grant, local authority delivery, or warmer homes funding. But quite often I get people coming back to me, it could be like a year later, going, I've just had a new condensing boiler put in, I've just had some underfloor insulation put in, and actually those are very valuable. And actually we haven't tracked that or reported on that particularly as an organization. And with the pressure that we're now going to see, because funders have got used to being able to see some impressive numbers like £6 or £9 return on investment for every £1 you give us, now a big chunk of that's been taken away because of the warm home discount isn't going to be up to us, it's going to be coming from energy suppliers, and no one can save any money from switching at the moment. So those easy to count financial values are going to be sort of very, very diminished for us. So I was just thinking outside the box there.
Catherine has a question in the chat, and she also has her hand up, so I'll let her ask her question.
Hello. I guess to all of you, really, what do you think makes a standout application that makes you go, ooh? And whoever can answer first.
I'll have a go. So I think for us, I would say probably not necessarily impact at scale, but for us it's actually more about reaching hard to reach communities. So a kind of application that really demonstrates that sort of like a way of working that allows people to real tackle the fuel poverty, communities that just don't access other types of support, so that there's no description or sort of what hard to reach ultimately is, other than just people who don't easily access other types of support. So it could be anything from, like, for example, projects around migrant communities who freshly arrived in the UK, who don't necessarily know how the energy system works. It might not be the immediate thing on the home, but if they have found a home that's poorly insulated, etc., and that maybe other agencies don't think energy efficiency is the top priority in supporting them, actually it is because of bills and everything. So those kind of projects that really are not necessarily sort of mainstream, but actually could make a real difference to hard to reach communities, and then obviously produce lessons learned, ultimately, in that we can share with all of our partners. We really enjoy those kind of applications because we really see them as making a lot of difference, but also providing insights to all of our partners as to what they potentially could consider in future rounds of fuel poverty work.
Great. I was particularly excited by the idea of doing a funding bid video, which Perrin mentioned. That would be quite fun, I think. Or would it be stressful? I don't know. Probably both. Would anyone else like to answer, Catherine?
I think I was going to mention that the video pitch first it's a big plus. The funders really like them just because they are a really good way to showcase your passion and what you can do with your project. And they really don't have to be like Hollywood style production. It's just about seeing the people behind the project as well is a plus. Obviously written applications are fantastic as well, but we have seen that funders quite like video applications. And Michael, your answer was just spot on. But in terms of more of the technical things on our end, it's just, as I mentioned earlier, just having an application where the deliverables and the impact is clearly outlined and understandable by the funder is really key as well.
Thank you, Perrin. Catherine, could you send G the link just in case?
I have done.
She's done her usual. Okay.
Shall I chip in as well?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
That helpful. I did it a little bit earlier, I know, and I may sound like a broken record with the others, but yeah, I think the thing that gives me joy when I'm going through them is when you see. So we've laid our application form out in that sort of theory of change approach. So it will ask you about your aims, your objectives, what rationale is behind it, and all of that kind of stuff. And that's partly so that one application form can serve a wider range of different projects, but the key thing is that it's really helpful to us to see that someone has really thought through a project, that it's focused on how do we achieve benefit for the people in vulnerable situations that we are trying to help. And so I think the thing that quite often gets missed is here are the actions that we're going to do, and here is why those actions are the right thing to do for this group. And it's something that's quite easy to miss out. And the rationale section of our application form is a really good place to do that, because all of that stuff just kind of really reinforces the credibility of the project, the fact that it's absolutely focused on the aim. All of that's really helpful. Ability to give quality advice, that's something that obviously Energy Saving Trust has been involved in this area for a long time, and we want to try and make sure that we're funding projects that are going to give really good quality advice. We get a huge amount of advice applications, so we have to judge them on those kinds of things. Reading our guidance always helps, because it's easy. There's a few pitfalls in there that if you haven't read the guidance, you can trip up an otherwise really good project on. So do have a look at that. We tried to lay it out so you can have it next to you. And I think partnerships, I've a long time ago been on the phones as an energy advisor in the old Energy Efficiency Advice Centre network, for those of you with long memories. yeah, exactly. And it is easy for energy advice wars to break out, to use a slightly frivolous term, at a local level, because the sector is pushed into competition, and we're conscious that we're doing that to people as well. Everybody has to compete for funding, but we can see that is sometimes a really bad thing. Maybe sometimes it can help get the best possible projects, but sometimes it can be a really bad thing, particularly for the client group that we're supporting. And so if there's an application that says, here's what we're going to do, and here's what everyone, I mentioned earlier, here's what people around us are doing, and here's how we're going to work with them to all be kind of greater than the sum of our parts, that's really helpful. And one area that we don't get applications as often as we'd like is we often get applications from charities that are not energy specialists, but they support a really vulnerable group, and they've got fantastic reach through to vulnerable people who might otherwise be really difficult to reach. Kind of disability related charities, health related charities, all sorts of groups like that. And there are quite a few of those applications that we get, and we kind of think, I want to fund this, but there's just not enough in there to sort of show that they really understand energy advice, they're going to be able to deliver that really well. And you kind of think, oh, if there was just a partnership there with a kind of expert energy advice partner, it could be amazing. And so I think, that's definitely worth looking for, is, are there charities out there? I know it can be sometimes difficult to work with some of those other organizations, but I guess if you can find some of those charities that have got the reach through to vulnerable people, but maybe not the expertise, and find a good way of doing that, we'd love to see more applications like that. And we have funded some of those as well. So yeah,
thank you, Graham. Yeah, there's the one I particularly liked out of Redress recently, or not so relatively recently, was the one looking at more of a case management approach in South London with Thinking Works and a couple of the Citizens Advice and someone else, can't remember off the top of my head. And actually it seemed like a really kind of intelligent way of actually going, let's tackle that problem using these approaches, but in this different way, in this different focus. And I'm interested to see how that actually pans out. So I've been waffling on now to answer that, to respond to that, and magically in that time my long-term comrade in arms, Giovanna, has arrived from Chelsea, touch wood.
Hi Giovanna, thank you for coming. Hopefully you're there.
Yep, I'm here.
Yay.
Over to you, G. We've just heard from the funders and asked them questions, and now we're going to hear about an alternative way of funding energy advice, fuel poverty tackling projects from yourself.
Alrighty, so Alex, many thanks for inviting me. as I said, as you've heard, one way to go with fuel poverty projects is to access grant funds or commissions. But CELSI has always worked in a way where we try to maximise returns from a sort of taking a social enterprise approach. And basically, one of the things that an organisation who is involved in fuel poverty alleviation has is contact with the fuel poor. We know what people's situations are and who can benefit from particular types of intervention, which it may surprise you is in fact something that a lot of agencies are interested in knowing about. So for a number of years, we've been involved in essentially what we call lead generation work. Am I allowed to share some slides?
Oh, ask Catherine.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, brilliant. So I'm going to share a little slideshow with you from beginning. It'll let me do that. From beginning. Can you see that in normal slide mode?
Yeah, not in present mode, just the slide with the slides on the left. Use the present button. There you go. Hey.
I never remember how it works in Zoom. So there are a number of schemes. There've always been schemes to enable fuel poor to access funding to increase the energy efficiency of their homes. There's always been a scheme called ECO, which stands for the Energy Companies Obligation, whereby energy companies are obligated to reduce their carbon emissions by retrofitting homes of residents with loft cavity wall insulation. And it's a carbon obligation, not a fuel poverty obligation. They have also been there's also been sources of fund from local government or regional government. So the London has the GLA. The mayor has had a scheme called the 3 rounds of the Warmer Homes Fund, which they put some money towards insulating homes of fuel poor clients. And currently there's a set of schemes called collectively called LAD. It stands for the Local Authority Delivery Scheme. This is essentially, many people don't know, but the Green Home Grant for the able to pay was pretty much a flop. But there was another part of the Green Home Grant that was money essentially given to bodies, local authorities, or energy hubs. So I don't know if you know, there's a Southeast Energy Hub that sort of concerns itself with energy transitions across the whole of the Southeast. They were given some money. What do I mean by HUG? That's Home Upgrade Grant. This is another load of government money that was given via local authorities or regional bodies or energy hubs to distribute to householders who have electrical heating. So why involve community groups in this? Does anyone have any ideas? Why is it a good idea for us lot here to get involved in one of these schemes?
Because we're not energy suppliers or local authorities.
We can get to hard to reach communities.
Exactly. So in my experience, oops, I didn't mean to do that. In my experience, the people that are least likely to access some of this government money are the people that most need it, are the most vulnerable. So who is unlikely? Can anyone give me an idea of the kinds of people who will really need this grant, would really are desperately in need with energy saving measures such as loft cavity wall, underfloor insulation, external wall insulation, internal, who are unlikely to access it? Anyone got any ideas?
People on low incomes and with long-term health conditions and disabilities.
Pensioners, asylum seekers.
Yep.
Recent migrants.
That's right.
Language barriers. Right.
Yep. So anyone with a digital barrier, because mostly they advertise these kind of things online. Anyone with a digital, with that doesn't tend to engage in social media, anyone who can't read, so people who struggle with literacy, people who struggle with English language are very unlikely to accept this, and anyone who is scared shitless of schemes like this. So anyone who's maybe heard that retrofit can go badly wrong, anyone who maybe has anxiety or depression or mental health issues is unlikely to access these schemes. So one of the things that we as community groups can offer is access to those very, very vulnerable people and hand-holding. So one of the things that CELSI has done is acted as what I call a lead generator. So we've gone out and found people who are very, very vulnerable, who could benefit from one of these schemes. And what we've done is generally we've charged a fee of £100. So it can be a source of income, not huge. I would say in the last financial year, CELSI, from various combined activity with different schemes, has earned about £10,000. Not a huge amount of money, but however, we are, in terms of fuel poverty, we do work at scale. So we've been working at this for 8 years. We've gradually built up the scale and scope of our work. We currently employ 6 energy advisors, full-time equivalent energy advisors, and our budget for fuel poverty work is about £170,000. Was £170,000. We're working with one-to-one in depth with about 1,000 households, so it's relatively big what we do. So we were last year, to give you an example, last year we were working on a scheme that we call LAD 2. That just means it's the second iteration of one of these LAD schemes. Don't worry. The people that administered it was the South East London Energy Hub that work across the whole of the South East. And basically what they had was grant funding for an average of £10,000 spent per household for people who were very low income and had low energy efficiency. So eligibility criteria were an income of less than £20,000 after housing costs and an EPC of D or below. That's an energy performance certificate, so it was very inefficient. And we were engaging in that essentially as lead generators. We found.
Sorry, Dee, you're going to have to speed up a bit.
Yep. We found 100 people who were eligible for this. We were also, and I'm going to talk less about this, we're also working as retrofit assessors on their behalf. So we were assessing the needs because we employ people with the right skills. We were supporting them with assessment and allowing them to handhold them through the schemes. Now, here is the social return on a previous scheme that we worked on that was actually the first version of the warmer homes. Here is how the world and our clients benefited in terms of social return on investment. This is if you monetized all the benefits of energy efficiency. As you can see, it's hugely beneficial if you monetize it all. It's hugely beneficial in carbon emissions. It's probably improving the energy efficiency of people's the fuel poor homes is probably one of the most impactful thing you can do. It's not a one-year intervention. It just the benefits keep on piling in. I won't give you some case studies because I'm running out of time. But essentially, what we were doing is we're finding people who were in fact hard to reach, so to cut a long story short, this was a story of a family whose boiler was installed completely wrong and was blowing toxic, was basically poisoning their young daughter. We came in and enabled them to upgrade their heating system. And here's the story of somebody who was divorced. Husband left her with a half gutted home, and we were able to come in and support her with making that home habitable. Is it a sustainable model? If you do it as a standalone business model, you would probably need to employ someone 2.5 days a week to do the outreach, and you get a referral fee of £100. That's not a self-sustaining business model. That won't provide you with enough income to employ that outreach officer. However, it does work as an add-on. So if you're doing fuel poverty alleviation projects anyway, therefore you are doing the outreach. Yes. it does work as in terms, and that £100, the way we spend it is generally we use it to employ somebody to support someone through that schemes, to do a little bit of hand-holding, to be the trusted intermediary. So that was all I was going to say. Have I fitted into my time?
Giving me kittens. Okay, so if a group...
There's a really good question from Helen, actually, of how did you measure returns? It might be one that we come back to
That's a whole workshop.
In a follow-up. But
social return on investment, it's a scheme. I used a system that was built by Hacked.
HACT.
If you put Hacked social return on investment into Google, you will see how I did this.
She's quite clever as well, but they're using the hack tool is all laid out for you to follow. We could do, maybe in future there's a session on amount monitoring and evaluation, but not this time around. But what I need to do is very quickly thank everybody for their participation and attending this session. Thank each and every one of our speakers and presenters from the funders, and being very brave to taking live questions from people that want to apply and get money from them, because that could be opening yourself up to a world of hurt. But luckily we were all very reasonable and polite. I want to signpost you to contacting G directly if you're interested in getting referral fees for each scheme. We've got a third, fourth and fifth. We've got more sessions every Friday lunchtime for the next 4 months, so come along to those. If you're not a member of Community Energy London, why not? It's £1. You can't get much more value than that these days. And we've ran 2 minutes over, and so I do apologise about that, but hopefully everybody got a useful takeaway from today. And I will be sending out a 5-question very short evaluation on this session, because it's very much piloting this sort of support for you guys. And enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a lovely weekend, everybody.
thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
See you later.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.